Well, we got a spicy one. We have a three-way trade between the Boston Bruins, the Washington Capitals, and appearing once again, the Minnesota Wild. Before we talk about exactly what the trade was, can we just shout out the Washington Capitals? No, they deserve it. You know why? Because they just made a trade. Few teams around the league seem to have forgotten they could do that. Because shortly before this trade was made, they actually tweeted that they were keeping Orlov out of the lineup for trade-related reasons. Which is becoming a joke because a number of teams have done it. The Coyotes started with Jacob Chychrun, then it was the Blue Jackets with Vladislav Gavrikov, who's going to come up again in this video. But what you might notice about those two guys, at least at the time I'm shooting this, neither of them have been traded. But rather than have a whole song and dance, the Capitals just sort of traded them. Good! Yes! Thank you! Don't keep us waiting! I know people who stayed up till 2, 3 in the morning when the Chychrun thing was announced and nothing happened. But the most important thing you need to know, Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov are Boston Bruins. Before we break it down, think you know which way it's going to go? Head on over to Sports Interaction. When the puck drops, Sports Interaction has you covered pre-game, live betting on all major sports, and prop bets. Want to bet? Go to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN and download the Sports Interaction app, but only if you're 19 plus. Please play responsibly. So, like I mentioned off the top, this is a three-way deal, and it's kind of convoluted the way this happened. One insider had this little bit, another insider had this little bit, another insider was completely wrong. I feel like we knew Orlov was going to the Bruins like 20 minutes before we knew Minnesota was even involved. But as usual, cap-friendly to the rescue. I don't know what I would do without them. I don't know what you would do without them. I don't know what any of us would do without cap-friendly. So here's what they have to say. All in all, the Bruins get three pieces here. They get Garnet Hathaway from the Washington Capitals, Andrei Svetlakov, who began this trade with the Minnesota Wild, and Dmitry Orlov at 25% because the Capitals retained 50 and Minnesota got the other 25. So the Bruins get Garnet Hathaway at his full $1.5 million, but they get Dmitry Orlov for a little under 1.3. The Washington Capitals get a first-round pick in 2023 from Boston, a third-round pick in 2024 from Boston, and a second-round pick in 2025 from Boston. They also get versatile but aging forward Craig Smith at a $3.1 million cap hit. So this trade is very similar to the Ryan O'Reilly-Noel Acciari trade between Minnesota, Toronto, and St. Louis, but the difference is that the Capitals had to eat some money. Like, not just salary retention, they had to take on a player as well. Because the Capitals are also in a weird position because they're selling, but also not punting. More on that later. Just like they did in the three-way deal with Toronto and St. Louis, Minnesota deals a prospect, but they get a draft pick for their troubles, a fifth rounder in 2023 from Boston. So the way it ends, Minnesota gets a fifth rounder in 2023. That's it. The Capitals get Craig Smith, a first, a second, and a third. The Bruins get Garnet Hathaway, Dmitry Orlov, and prospect Andrei Svetlakov. Right off the bat, you know I cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but objectively, I love this deal for the Boston Bruins. And these guys are unreal at trade deadline acquisitions. They really are. As I often say, the Boston Bruins, maybe better than any other team in the league, acquire Boston Bruins. No team acquires players that exactly match their identity like Boston does. Garnet Hathaway is going to be a huge problem for teams in the playoffs. Not like they were ever going to have a walk in the park with the Bruins, who are well in first place in the first place. Hathaway's like your ideal bottom six guy. He's 6'3", he's between 205 and 210 pounds, and he hits everything that moves. He's got 9 goals and 7 assists for 16 points in 59 games. In his career, he gets a point about every 1 in 4 games, and in the playoffs, he's got 5 career points in 24 games, so he gets a point roughly every 5 games. Big player, mean player, decent defensive player. He matches Boston like just so perfectly. And then there's Dmitry Orlov, who we just weren't making a big enough deal about because he sort of entered the rumor conversation over the last week or so. Chychrun, Gavrikov, Luke Shen, these are names that have been out there for a while. All of them linked to the Bruins at some point, by the way. But Orlov is, it's a match made in heaven. There's another guy who, at least a few times a season, puts someone on a highlight reel with an enormous hit. 3 goals, 19 points in 45 games. Not a huge offensive guy, but a contributor for sure. And he's not going to have as big of a burden in Boston as he had in Washington. And for a defender who is taxed with as much as he does and does as much as he does, he's only taken 10 penalty minutes this season, which is 5 minor penalties, which is genuinely difficult for a top 4 defenseman to pull off. Oh, and 23 points in 74 career Stanley Cup playoff games. Oh, by the way, Hathaway was with the Flames when it happened, but Dmitry Orlov is a Stanley Cup champion. He won it in 2018 with the Caps. Adding Orlov to McAvoy and Lindholm and Clifton, who apparently was not traded, and Grzelcyk, and oh my goodness, it's ridiculous. Adding Hathaway to one of the most annoying and punishing forward groups in the NHL. Who wants to play the Bruins, man? It's gonna be a miserable time. It was already gonna be a miserable time, and now it's just even worse. Not to mention, between Brad Marchand licking someone 2 different times and Hathaway getting suspended for spitting on Eric Goodbranson, they have cornered the market on players with mucus-related infractions, which is, ironically, nothing to sneeze at. We'll see what happens with Garnet Hathaway, who is a pending UFA at the end of the season, but I mean, who cares about the end of the season? The Bruins have one concern with the end of the season, and that's that they win the cup. But it's been reported from several different insiders, including STPN's own Chris Johnston, that Orlov appears to be a pure rental. I mean, the Bruins seem exactly like the sort of team who would find a way to re-sign him, but a guy who was already making $5.1 million, if he has a good stretch run with the Bruins, if he has a good playoff, and they win, I don't see how he makes much less than that. Then there's the Washington Capitals, who were in a playoff spot in the East like last week. They're getting Ovechkin back. That's huge. Not quite sure what they're up to because they're not out of the playoff picture, and I don't think they should stop trying to make the playoffs. They could probably make the playoffs with the roster they have, potentially, especially with an injury to Barzal with the Islanders. That's brutal. I wonder if they flip one of those picks, especially the Boston one, who, let's be honest, we're expecting that pick to be 29, 30, 31, 32. We wouldn't be surprised if the Bruins ended up in the Final Four. And if they are punting on the season, Craig Smith is a pending UFA. He's a pretty steady bottom 6 guy, can give you some competent second line minutes depending on the role you put him in. What if they end up flipping him too? I could definitely see that happening. If the Capitals do decide to go full-blown selling mode, oh wow, they got a lot of guys. Lars Eller, pending UFA, 3.5. Craig Smith, like I just mentioned, 3.1. Connor Sherry, UFA, 1.5. And all of this is coming from Cap Friendly, which I wish I could just download to my brain. Marcus Johansson, 1.1. Nicola Aubé-Kubel makes $1 million. He's a pending UFA. They got him off waivers. Anything you get for him, even future considerations, it's something. Unless it's nothing. That's a complicated thing about future considerations. And I had to double check this. Producer Drew, can you put it on the screen? Not a one of the Capitals' current defensemen is under contract. A few of them are restricted free agents. A few of them aren't. Not one of them is signed. I know the Capitals have kind of made a commitment to never stop going for it as long as Alexander Ovechkin is on the team. And if that's going to stay the case, I'd love to see how they plan on pulling that off, because I don't know if I mentioned this, they don't have any signed defensemen. Steve, what about John Carlson? Okay, one guy, he's on LTIR. 2 forwards on LTIR, Connor Brown and Carl Hagelin, both pending UFAs. So you could argue this is the perfect opportunity to restock the cupboard and get as many picks as possible. That is true, but if you want to stay competitive, you need players on your hockey team. I wonder about the Capitals' future. I'm not sure what's going on. But, just for fun, imagine Ovechkin playing beside Connor Bedard. Ew, right? Yeah, ew. And then finally, there's the Minnesota Wild. Excuse me while I compliment Cap Friendly again. I forgot this was a thing. Because Cap Friendly retained on both the Leafs trade with the Blues and the Bruins trade with the Capitals, they only have 1 retention slot left before the offseason. It's actually kind of good that that rule is in place. Like, you can't just basically be like at the cap floor and just retain salary for everybody in the league. Like, you gotta have some pride. You gotta put a limit on these things. But again, according to Cap Friendly, the Wild do have about $2.6 million in cap space remaining. It'll be interesting to see what role they play, because they're kind of the West's Washington Capitals, where they could, like, totally, not surprisingly at all, make the playoffs, but they're kind of selling. The Capitals are selling big chunks of their roster. The Wild are selling cap space. So far, anyway. There's definitely such things as a bad draft selection, but there's no such thing as a bad draft pick, and the Wild have gotten 2 in the span of about a week. They got Boston's 5th this year, and they got the Leafs 4th in 2025. Keep those cupboards full, and you could always flip them if you want. Now, I think this trade is going to have a huge ripple effect. I haven't read any reports yet, but I kind of get the impression this came together somewhat quickly. There's a couple things there. Number one, almost as soon as this trade was announced, the New York Rangers announced that they were keeping Vitaly Kravtsov and Jake Leschyshyn out of the lineup for, not trade-related reasons, roster management reasons. Congratulations, we have finally found the new general body soreness. Roster management reasons? That's a healthy scratch, isn't it? Everything is roster management. When you put a guy in, when you take a guy out, like, what are you doing? But it's led a lot of people to think, oh, Patrick Kane, is he going to be a Ranger after all this? Patrick Kane, unlike Hathaway and Orlov, has been in these rumors for a long time. Chychrun has been in these rumors. I had heard that the Bruins thought his price was too much, and I think they thought that about Gavrikov as well, because they were linked to Gavrikov in rumors, especially over the past week, to the point where it sounded like it was on the verge of being done. Reminds me of the Chychrun trade, where it sounded like 2 weeks ago at this point that their deal with the Kings was on the verge of being done. I wonder if what happened here is a deal with the Coyotes and the Kings fell through, and now the Coyotes don't have a dance partner. And I wonder if a deal between the Blue Jackets and Bruins fell through, and now the Blue Jackets don't have a dance partner. And here's the thing, only 16 teams make the playoffs, a bunch of them have bought already. You're running out of dance partners. And these are teams with aspirations of getting a king's ransom for their players. First round picks on first round picks. Now the Coyotes, they don't even really have to worry about it because, after all, Jacob Chychrun, who is young and good at hockey, is still under contract. So show up and play for our team. You like the money, don't you? Vladislav Gavrikov is not under contract. He is an unrestricted free agent. Who knows? Maybe the Bruins find a way to get back in on Chychrun, get back in on Gavrikov. I just don't know how they do it. Also, like, geez, you're going to win the President's Trophy in your sleep. Where are you going to put him? You just added Orlov. What are you getting Chychrun and Gavrikov for? The third pair? 3 firsts for the third pair? So I think for Chychrun and especially Gavrikov, you need to start looking at all the other buyers and think to yourself, who's in on this guy? And has the price dropped? The NHL trade deadline is a week tomorrow, and we're going to find out how good Jarmo Kekalainen's poker face is. So, that's my little reaction to this video. What do you think of this three-way deal? Are three-way deals, like, in fashion now? Are they fetch? The Capitals, are they buying? Are they selling? And if they're selling, how much? And the Bruins, it almost feels like, when they win the Stanley Cup, how many games is it going to be in? Because that team is an absolute wagon. So, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe to SDPN if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Oh boy, this trade deadline's getting spicy. And there's going to be nothing left next week.